Thanks, Nicole. And I just want to emphasize that it really is a team effort. I think that it speaks for itself with the presentations, but a lot of people on this project have been working on these topics for many years, and we wouldn't be here together today without that collective historical expertise. And I think, as David Rumsey and many people here at Stanford, like us, recognized the time was right to try and bring these pieces together. And that has been what has been really exciting, to just have that opportunity at this moment in time. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit more about a slightly bigger context to help ease us into a bit of discussion. So I'm not going to talk for long. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that actually this world that we are working in on machine 3D maps is part of a larger and quickly growing field where people are using computational methods to analyze maps that have been digitized. And of course, those maps, as they sit alongside other kinds of spatial information like remote sensing imagery and other born digital content. And what's exciting about this, and you've already seen this implemented a bit, is that text on maps is actually most powerful, so to speak, when we can link it to other information. So whether that's linking it to other information on the map, linking the text to the symbol that actually locates the object that the text is describing or naming, or to information in other external data sets. So for example, the OpenStreetMap content. So this is a really important opportunity for thinking about text on maps in the context of a broader world of information. And because we're creating text on maps data with a combination of manual and sort of hybrid as well as automatic methods, we therefore have to think really carefully about how we do that linking, how we evaluate the linking, and what it's appropriate to link to for different collections and use cases. So here I just wanted to give an example of some other stuff that's happening with maps that we would want to link text data to. So selfishly, I put an example from my other project where we're visualizing residential streets from 19th century British censuses. Those are the yellow and orange and red lines you see here. The dots, which are actually a bit hard to see, I apologize, represent railway infrastructure. And the yellow to red sort of change in the streets represents the proximity of a residential street to very high density rail infrastructure. So this is part of a study of understanding, thinking about rail in 19th century Britain as a disamenity in communities. And of course, being able to then bring in text on maps as another kind of data set that we can explore the relationship, say, the names of all the pubs and the names of all the churches and the names of all the factories on these maps will then allow us to refine our understanding of the cultural context of railways in urban spaces as amenities or disamenities. So work to be done. So to come back just to machine 3D maps, and you've already heard some people speak specifically about kind of like nitty-gritty details of next steps. And you're going to hear this message a lot. It's really about beginning to build a community of people who want to help work on developing the methods and the tools, to document them, to test them out on new collections, and to use them for many different applications. So of course we're all of us are working to openly release the data, models, metadata, and user annotations. I couldn't help put up here the links to the very new and not yet quite finished, but very exciting deposits that we've made into the Stanford Digital Repository, thanks to Kim Durante and others. But yeah, just massive thanks for helping us think through how to do that and actually make it happen. We want this data to be out there for people to play around with and to explore and learn alongside us as we do that. We want our tools, as well as the data, to be open source, sustainable, adaptable, and portable to other digitized map collections. We all know that the world of digital maps is growing, and it's really exciting to know that there are many libraries around the world that are interested in having these kinds of capabilities, and we are excited to work with them. I think first, we're really driven to prepare training materials for library, archive, museum, gallery professionals, as well as researchers in various disciplines to set up and use these tools. And the map curator documentation is a great example of how this is already starting to happen. We are refining and generalizing. Those seem like oxymorons, but in fact, we need to do both of them. The map creator pipeline and the annotation tools for specific collections that have different languages in them, or a wide variety like the Rumsey collection. Finally, and I think this points to some of the comments that Stace made earlier, it's very exciting for us to consider integrations with other services and other kinds of digital infrastructure that make search and annotation and discoverability possible. So IIIF is, of course, really essential to that. And then finally, we are hoping that the workshop tomorrow will give some examples of this. You've already seen, for example, David Wong showing how you can pull this data into Mirador, but simplifying the sample data selection and export, and being able to train researchers to work with this data and combine it with other data, as I just mentioned, is a real priority. So I just want to end here with a couple of questions. So we kind of our ambition is to propose to build this community around machines reading maps, where we can focus on tool development, documentation, and use, as well as data exploration, evaluation, enrichment, analysis, and interpretation. And I'll just end with these two questions really for the room, which will hopefully tie in with everything else you've heard in this panel, which are, what are the kinds of opportunities for this activities that you see emerging from what you've learned about the collaboration and the results of the collaboration between Machines Reading Maps and David Rumsey today? And finally, what seem like the most timely priorities to help GLAM institutions benefit from the Machines Reading Maps toolkit and to promote text on maps as research data? So again, coming back to this idea that it isn't just about discoverability, it isn't just about research data. Really, these things can be worked on in tandem and in fact share a lot of the same infrastructure and needs. And we're really excited about that connective tissue. So thank you. And thanks to Nicole and David for chairing this morning's session.
All right, I think that Stace is going to come up and moderate the questions that might be coming in over Zoom. And if those of you have questions here in the crowd, wait a moment, raise your hand, and let me come to you with the microphone so our remote folks can hear.
So I'll read these, and then Nicole, if you would hand the microphone off to the best people to answer these questions. All right, so we've discussed that. Here's a question. Thank you for talking about the annotation UI for users. Have you had any user feedback on this feature? And if so, what have you learned? And I think that's probably for Rainer and Valerian.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We actually don't have any feedback for this version yet. We had some, let's say, informal first impressions from some friendly beta users, and well, so far they have found it quite easy. But the opportunity, the feedback we have received more often is that they would really like to be able to create the annotations from scratch. So that has really emerged as a gap. And I mean, as there is no technical impediment in enabling that. We just decided to start with a simpler choice of actions. I don't know, Rainer, if you want to say anything more about the feedback or other version of Anatorius, what kind of feedback we got from that, from the NLS?
Yeah, so I think the main point is that we've had those two kind of friendly user sessions. You never know how honest, whether you would get honest negative feedback. But yeah, I think so far people were kind of reasonably happy with it, except for this one point where I said, yeah, so people would like to create annotations from scratch, would probably also appreciate guidelines on what to do with if you have like two words that are annotated separately, although it might be like one thing that you want to mark as one label. Other than that, we've also used the old kind of internal interface that we built for the team for this crowdsourcing campaign with the National Library of Scotland. I think that was interesting because there we did collect user feedback, and the feedback was that no one said that it was hard to use, but many people said like we had like a five-point range, and 4 and 5 was difficult to use. We did get a single one there, but many people would answer with 3 or 2. So yeah, so there are definitely rooms for improvement. And then there are small things that in this National Library of Scotland campaign, we had a forum so people could send very specific questions, which are definitely on our agenda to address and to look into. But yeah, I would need to read up again on what those were specifically, but about grouping, about sometimes really about power features. So if you're doing a complex task, it takes too many clicks. That was the feedback. So we had designed it for people where we said, okay, we probably want to do it for amateurs and not for power users. But the surprise was that people would turn into power users very quickly. So I think that's also a lesson learned.
I'll just quickly add something because it's really important, and it does come up frequently as the multilingual issue. And so people wanting to add annotations in whatever language, which may not actually be, there will be more in the next version, but currently fewer results, in the, say, the correct language, or if it's transliterated or the correct script. And so the ability to at least capture that kind of specificity in the annotations is really important, and hopefully we'll be able to use that in the future, in a variety of ways.
Okay, thanks. Are there questions in the house? David?
So this is going back to something, Valeria, you showed us earlier, and I think this came up before that as well, and that's the reliability of the results. So when you go through the user interface and you keyword a location, you get back a single result. And if you follow that through to that one map and that one word, that annotation is, I think, usually 100%, sort of very close. And then there's sort of the fuzzy searching, which will catch some of the errant words. But when you revealed the, like, let's see all the annotation on the whole map, then it was obvious how much is missing. There were partial words and missing words all over the place, right? Even with all the content that had been grabbed. So, and looking at all the different maps that's happening on, and just knowing the imagery and what we're looking at and what the processes are, this is mostly seems to have to do with image legibility. So just pixel refinement in the images, basic image, sort of image science stuff. There are some really powerful tools out there for refining image legibility, or whether it's around text or just photographs in general, right? So AI sharpen sorts of things, AI and context aware fill, so filling in where missing pixels are, tightening up pixels. And those tools over the past few years have gotten really, really powerful in being able to extract from very, very fuzzy imagery, really refined looking results. And I think some people have even used it on sort of extracting text from very poorly preserved documents. Has a team looked at, or is there any possibility of being able to integrate some of those tools into the imagery to refine the results? So right now we're just working with what's scanned, I assume, right? Where there's no processing going on in the background. Can processing be added to that to refine the legibility of the images to increase our grab? I don't know who's this is for, but
So thank you for the comment. Yes, there will be. So I think okay, let me think about how to answer this question. So the question is about there are tools that we can use to be able to enhance the image so that the machine learning model would be able to better read the maps and generate the text. Yes, there is a possibility that we can incorporate such tool into the map curator pipeline. As you see today, the pipeline is an engineering process that takes maps divided into regions and then a machine learning model just to detect it. Right? So this type of tool could be a pre-processing component before the text spotter actually read the maps. And also what we are working on is to see what are the knowledge that we can incorporate into the machine learning model to help improve this. So maybe in a way that the model would be able to know, hey, these are maps, so there will be like 14 lines. And from those 14 lines, we know that we should not split the text labels. Right? So in one big challenge in handling all these maps is there are just too many different types of them, and they have very different conditions. And in a data-driven world, to have the machine to be able to recognize this text, we need to show them a lot of examples. Right? That's what we are doing today. But also, if we have the knowledge part, that can also help us to reduce the requirement of the data set that we need. So we're trying to balance both parts and see what are the things that we can ingest into the model and help to do it. I guess it's a really long answer, but short answer is yes, that would be possible.
All right, we've still got some questions online. See if we can go with one of those. We have a question about accessibility, and I'm just going to condense this and say that the question really is about any plans for full accessibility reviews of the visualizations and the interface, the search return interfaces. So I think that's going to be probably for Drake and David.
That's always a difficult response because it's a visual element. There are some things that are happening there because of the alt tags that are represented on as you roll over each individual annotation. So that itself will help allow for that. But when we've always looked at like VPAT guidance and kind of these types of things where you're kind of really trying to enhance it, there's only so much you can do. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of handwork in order for that to exist. And especially when it comes to imagery. Although this actually takes it a further step than just having a descriptive metadata about the object that somebody can say, or a title that is exposed to a screen reader. This screen reader might be able to enhance that just because of the alt tags in the place locations on the zoomed in location where they're at, and also the single item that it's on. So there's potential there, just inherently in how we're trying to do it. We also try our best to use libraries that are designed for accessibility, but there's also the difficulty of how do you make the whole product look like that? So it's a challenging question. Let's say we hope to keep on moving in those directions to make it better for the people who need those accessibility helps and hints.
And I think this one would also be for Drake and David. Thanks for explaining some of the back-end indexing approach. When explaining the JSON retrieved from Luna, you indicated that you're currently using the image coordinates that are saved, but not the geo coordinates. Could you clarify the difference between these and why you are using one rather than the other?
The delivery of the those coordinates are for the flat map that you're seeing within the interface itself. The geo coordinates allow us to say that particular annotation have these geo coordinates as well. So we want to be able to enhance it for later search capability, and also so we can actually incorporate that. We wanted to pull the back end data in place for later searchability within geo-referenced methods of search and find and cross-reference and so on. So that's it was to do it so that we can have future functionality.
Map rank search on
Yes.
annotations.
Right.
Absolutely. All right. And the last question we have on from the Zoom attendees is not a question. Just wanted to express applause and what a great tour. So congratulations to the team.
All right. Congratulations to everyone here. And any other questions from the room? One more. Oh, David.
It's just because I'm a cartographer, and so I want to see something like this. This is a question, comment maybe, I don't know. On maybe not with the older maps, but at some point with more modern maps, labels take on the visual hierarchy of the information within the map. So the labels start to become symbols themselves. They'll change by style, by color, font, spacing, all these different things, but they'll be organized so that all of the labels of a kind will fit a certain style, and they'll all be distinct from each other. And I recognize that this is not something that would be possible across the full spectrum of content in something like David's collection. But once you drill down into sets of maps or individual maps, would it be possible, has the team thought about being able to categorize or group the labels by their visual hierarchy so that we know that we're looking at? So I could, go into a map set and say, I want all of the labels that match this hierarchy that I happen to know is water or is towns or points of interest or whatever. Is that somewhere in sort of the workflow? Yes.
That's a really great question. So Gina's work on this actually won a best poster last year at the UCGIS. So the way we look at this problem is, like you said, every map is different. But it's very similar to how currently people look at, for example, there are apps that you can take the app, you can take a photo of a receipt. It will be able to say, this is an item name, and this is the price of that item. Right? How does it work? They look at the different font sizes and their locations on the receipt. One thing about map is the challenging part is you don't really have a layout, but you actually do have some layout, because as a human, we will be able to understand how to link all this text together by looking at their font size, font style, their placement, and nearby features. So we are working, what Gina is working on, a machine learning model that will be able to, at the same time, look at the image feature and the text content, trying to figure out how do we link all these individual words together automatically and give them a type. I know when I say type, we are not really domain experts that will be able to provide semantic information to say, what would be the definite type of this? Is it a place name or building? But at least what we can do is we can say within this map, we know there might be 4 types. And all these text labels, they belong to similar types of the same type. So it becomes a problem that we can group this label together based on the types, and we can work with the user, the machine can work with the user then comes in and say, oh, this first type from my study or from my discipline, this means something, right? And you start to provide more training data to the model. It's a great question. Thank you. Sometimes you don't have a like.
Thank you for this question. We are very much fascinated by, our next step would be investigating how we can capture the information that the text carries, that is not the meaning of the word. So that's, the symbolic value of the word, which is very high in maps, because maps are, synthetic text, and every label, every word means many things. And sometimes it looks like with this kind of corpus, we sort of flatten that symbolic value, but we would like to work to get that back, because, it's so important. There is so much in it. And as Yaoi said, maybe the integration between the automatic features and the contribution from the users might be the way to go forward for that.
David,
Questions?
West.
David.
This is sort of not so much a question, but just something I was talking to Katie about earlier, and it's down here at the bottom. How do we get this work to expand to other institutions? And also, how do we expand the content? I mean, those are not mutually excluding each other, but so just as an example, I was telling Karen Wolf at John Carter Brown Library, that has a wonderful map collection, about this work, and she's so excited, but her immediate response was, how can I apply this to my collection? And I think we're going to see that again and again and again. And so as we go through these 2 days, let's think about, how can this toolkit be exportable, without having to go through everything we've had to go through to others, because that's probably the best way to bring the community in, one of our goals, and also to expand the content, one of our goals. There are other ways. Old Maps Online has indicated a real interest in just helping us ramp up another 350,000 maps. But they're really part of our team already. So anyway, this is just something to think about over the next few days.
Thanks, David. Any other questions from within the room? And we're done with questions online?
Yeah, we're done. With
Okay.
Questions online.
Well, I want to thank everyone for your presentations in this panel. And the one piece that was really, I would say, missing from the panel, which is all of the different parts that make this happen, is of course the institutional and critical financial support. Without that, none of this happens. I just yesterday afternoon, we were celebrating the 7-year anniversary of the David Rumsey Map Center. And I just want to commend the work that David has done. I met David at the Open Source O'Reilly conference in 2004, and his presentation of maps was just so overwhelmingly successful. It was a huge standing ovation. And then I immediately approached him and invited him here to Stanford to speak at the Humanities Center. But this from that moment, David was way ahead of the curve embracing open source. And that's really what this is about. It's, getting this work done, making it happen, and sharing it with others. It's a beautiful thing. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you, David. Thanks, everyone.